Come.
Hello, Jeffco. This is Shauna with Jeffco PTA. We're grateful to have you here today. Kay Slater is our Jeffco PTA secretary, and she will be leading us through our secretary training. So I can't even speak anymore. I think I need a little more coffee. All right, Kay, kick us off.
Okay, so bear with me because I've not practiced. So we're gonna go through the slides and do my best not to just read them to you. So your Jeffco, your PTA secretary is basically, if there is anything you might want to reference later, it's your job to write it down. And that's my quickest way to be accountable, diligent. I mean, transparent. I think that's the easiest one. But your main job is going to be the minutes at the meeting. You're listening and you're making sure that you have a record of who's at the meeting, everything that gets said, everything that gets talked about. Make sure that you have a copy of the agenda that you get from the president that you should have worked with the president to put together. Always keep records of your previous meetings with you because you're going to reference them all the time. Someone's going to say, oh, didn't we talk about this? And you as the secretary can say, yes, we did. There are lots of rules on what to keep and where to keep it and how long to keep it. Those are all in your bylaws, and it's your job to make sure that those things get filed and kept according to the rules. Our mission with PTA, right here, every child, one voice. It's our job to make that child's potential a reality. We want to engage with all of our families. We want to empower all of our students, all of our staff, all of our parents and our community members to be advocates for our children and education in general. Let's go to, there we go. Okay. Bylaws sound really intimidating, and when you first read them, there's lots of wordy language, but they're actually very basic, and give a quick read through and it'll tell you everything that you need to know. Every set of bylaws will have to have your unit name. It'll talk about how many officers you need to have, what their jobs are, any committees that your PTA wants to have, rules regarding those committees and who can serve on them, how often you have to have your meetings, what is a quorum, and that's probably the most important one. A quorum is a number of people you have to have present in order to have a successful vote. So that'll be your paid members, and your bylaws will tell you exactly how many you need. Everything that you need to know about nominations, your vacancies, if you have a board position that nobody has agreed to run for. There are breakdowns of what you do in all of those situations. If your president leaves, who takes the spot? If your treasurer leaves, what do you do? All of those things are going to be in your bylaws. And then everything financial, and that's so important. We have so many rules with the IRS. So when to file your taxes, everything that you need to know about how you file that paperwork with Colorado PTA, the Secretary of State, and the IRS. If you are working on bylaws this year, we will let you know if that's come up that you're due to redo them. A lot of times you can just resubmit them the way they are if they don't need any changes. But if you have to work on them, let us know, and we will absolutely walk you through how to update them, how to vote on those. You need to get a current template from Jeffco PTA, but we can walk you through what those bylaws mean very, very simply.
And that's really, really important that everybody knows. The most common mistake that people make on bylaws are thinking that they are just going to submit, we're not going to make any changes, everything's the same, we'll just change the dates. There's a new template that covers electronic meetings that maybe you didn't have, or different changing state or national laws that impact nonprofits. So you do have to get that current template from your AAVP, and you need to be in good standing to be able to get it.
If you don't know who your AAVP is, let us know. Just email us at aavp@jeffcopta.org and we'll let you know.
We'll also give you a copy
If
of your
you need
bylaws.
if you need
Yeah.
your bylaws, we have those too. To change your bylaws, ideally, you would have a small committee who would go through them all, talk about things that you like, things that you don't, if you want to change your dues or, you know, that I know that my local unit, our fiscal date was, it didn't make any sense to end it when it ended. And so we had to submit to change that. Once your committee has sort of decided what might need to change about your bylaws, then they'll present it to your membership. You'll have a vote, make sure you have a quorum, and then we'll help you get that submitted and changed, and your secretary will keep them for the next 3 years until it has to get done again.
Beautiful. And this one again is just about the quorum. So you need to know how many people you actually legally have to have present to conduct votes. If you don't have, some people it'll be, for some PTAs it'll be 10, for some PTAs it'll be 5. You have to set what's really realistic. So, and you consider in Colorado snowstorms. So in January, when you decided to vote on something.
Snowstorms in June.
Right? It could be anything. So, and how you do it also during a pandemic, that's another one of those. We actually have on our website under events, 2 of our past meetings saved there with the recordings and with a sample of how we did voting online, and how we kept track of that with a Google survey, so that you can vote appropriately and have a record of who is a member and voted legally, and maybe some people occasionally who are not members who will vote anyway, and that doesn't count.
It's also really important to check your quorum portion of your bylaws, because if you don't have one, your bylaws will talk about what you need to do now and what happens if you need to take a vote and you don't have a quorum. There will be rules there for how you can call a special meeting so that you can make sure that those people are present. So that's a part of your bylaws that I strongly encourage everyone to look through. It's so, especially right now when we're so nervous about how many people are going to be showing up to our meetings. That's something that you really want to know, especially while we're getting our budgets all set and everyone wants to vote about that. Important to read that portion of your bylaws. And if you can't find them, let us know and we'll send you some.
And this one's really just going to be about standing rules again. So you don't want to get too specific in your bylaws and name absolutely every committee, or every single committee chair to your bylaws, because you then can get into issues, because your bylaws are a legal document. So if I have named 14 different committee chairs and in the bylaws, and maybe I can't fill 5 of them because we're always looking for volunteers, everybody knows how that looks, you're in violation of your bylaws if you don't fill something that you put in there. So your standing committee, Colorado PTA, the template outlines your nominating committee, your finance committee, those legally required committees to be a PTA that you absolutely have to have. But fall conference chair, for Jeffco PTA, it's in there, but maybe your fall carnival chair doesn't necessarily be in there. And this year, maybe you can't have a fall carnival because we don't have any place to have it. So we don't want to be in violation of our bylaws. So consider that. Standing rules instead can cover some of those committees, and maybe you want to change that and adopt that from year to year. So talk about that with your board, but don't paint yourself into a corner with those bylaws when you make changes. And know that standing rules are different. They're going to cover some of those details about your procedures on how you handle things. Now we actually have our parliamentarian on this call.
He's amazing.
Yes. So Michelle Patterson's our parliamentarian for Jeffco PTA. And she's definitely my right hand when I'm going, okay, how do we need to hold this vote to walk me through what needs to happen, especially when you're standing in front of people, or maybe Kay's busy taking minutes, and I'm trying to lead the meeting and I'm not sure exactly what is going on. So, or this discussion that's happening, my parliamentarian, which also could be just someone appointed to watch to watch how the meetings proceeded. Could be vice president that helps you as well. Not every local unit's going to have a parliamentarian, but to try to watch those, watch how you're proceeding so that we try to take a legal vote, and your bylaws spell that out. Your parliamentarian is going to be there to help you if we have all these different jobs. And she's going to call out and say, Shauna, you know, I'm going to recommend that you go backwards and we do this vote so appropriately, because this is what should have happened. And that's completely fine. So let's just make sure that we have legal votes by someone watching what's going on. Let's see, procedure books. So Kay, I'll let you talk about this one.
Yeah, all of those things, you know, you should have them someplace where you can access them at meetings so that you can refer back. So when someone says, how do we vote to put our endorsement on, you know, whatever school funding initiative this is, then you can say, here are the rules, and read them out. You want to have your calendar so that you know when you can schedule things, when you can't. Always have your bylaws handy, and always have, you know, your little list of standing rules so that you're sure that everything is being done the way it's supposed to, so that you can't come back and say, well, that wasn't a legal vote and I didn't want to do this. And as long as you just have those things handy for yourself, then you can assist everyone else who's sort of dealing with all the people part of a meeting, as long as you have that handy.
Well, and the other thing too, I want to make sure we talk about communication a lot. So communicating with our members is so very, very important. Kay handles a lot of the communications for, you know, PTA for our board, to keep everybody informed as to, you know, when the meetings, when the board reports are due. So when your committee reports are due, that's really important. She needs to have a contact list too. But at the same time, when you're a PTA board, you need to remember there are some privacy issues. Not all parents are going to want everybody to have their contact information. So you want to protect that, but you also want to give them that communication. Kay knows who all of our members are. So when she's got a contact list to be able to address the board, address the AAVPs, address all of our Jeffco PTA members. So that's all there on a document that specific people have. You know, we don't just give out our contact list. So like for all of you who are local units, you have members too. You know, Colorado PTA will, you know, include benefits for them and include them in the newsletter. Same with Jeffco PTA, we include some of that as well. Anybody can register for that, but we do not give out our contact list, not to vendors, not to, you know, fundraising people. So we don't give that information out ever at any time. It's PTA.
But they will ask you for it repeatedly. They will ask you.
Oh yes, they will.
And it's not.
Yes, that's not okay. So, and again, this is just goes over our 501c3 status, which we've covered on some of the other trainings as well. The secretary is going to, you know, make sure that in our documents on, for us, it's a Google Drive. So you could be storing your documents in another place, but you know, the 990 forms that we took care of, our treasurer took care of. So the Secretary of State filings that have already been taken care of. And just so you know, Jeffco PTA has already done all of those things because we got through our financial review. All of those documents have to exist. And, you know, not only is it our fiduciary obligation to do so, we need to make sure that those documents are stored somewhere, because when I go away at the end of my term, the next PTA board, so including the president and future officers, they need to have access to those documents so they know what happened. That's part of the reason why we send everything to Colorado PTA, so or to Jeffco PTA, and we forward them on for you, so that maybe I get really, really tired at the end of my term and I don't do a proper handoff to the next president, or Kay gets really tired at the end of her term and doesn't do the proper handoff. Well, we want to make sure that those future leaders have access to all of that. So if that hasn't happened, that's what Jeffco PTA and Colorado PTA are here for, so that we can make sure that you have all the documents that you need, and we keep them on file for as long as we need to. The records retention policy is also on our website, so under running your PTA and those resources. So take a look at those for how long you have to store things.
So your PTA secretary is elected, so chosen voluntold, whatever, however you want to say it. And your job is to manage and maintain all of those records, all of the lists, anything that anyone might say, hey, do you know when you're supposed to have that? Anything that is legal, any of our obligatory forms and papers, your secretary is going to have. All of even the stuff that our treasurer files that Shauna was talking about, I have them in a file folder here. Shauna has them. They're on our Google Drive. Colorado PTA has them. Those things are never going to be lost because I've put them in places where anyone can find them. That really is, in its most basic form, the secretary, if anything needs to be written down, it's your job to do it.
Yep.
Always have your bylaws, always have your minutes. That's about it.
Okay.
Recording the minutes. This is, I've often been bogged down trying to write down everything that everybody says. Totally not what you need to do. You are filling in the most basic information on the agenda that you worked on with your president. The only time that you need exactly what got said is when a motion is made. And that's it. Everything else can just be, if you have a special presentation, you don't need to write down what got said during the presentation, just that you had one and who your guests were. Make sure that you don't make yourself crazy trying to write down every single word. We're not dictating the entire meeting, just the basics. Always make sure that you have attendance. You always want to know who was at a meeting, specifically if there was a vote. And so we keep track of that all the time. We keep track of excused absences. If somebody has a conflict or an emergency, we know who let us know they weren't going to come and who didn't, so that we can keep track of who is adhering to their fiduciary duty and who's not. As secretary and the person that does the attendance, it's your job to make sure that you have a quorum, because you have access to all of those things and you know who's a member and who's not. You must have your minutes ready to approve from the last meeting at the new one. And those can only be approved, obviously, by someone who was at that meeting. All of the correspondence, all of the emails that get sent, that's your job, to let people know when there's a meeting, when something is due. You're going to be the one that keeps track of all those contact lists. I've never been the only one to write thank you notes, but thank you notes are always appreciated whenever somebody does something for you. So, certainly be a part of that. Whenever there's anything that needs to be filed, you should know where it is, know where to find it. Make sure that you're organized enough that you can. If Colorado PTA came and said, you know what, we have this problem, we have this issue we need to talk to you about, you need to be able to say, oh, I know exactly where that is. I guess I would preside over a meeting if all three of our VPs and our president wasn't there, but for the most part, I just write it down. But there is, in your bylaws, there is an order of ascension, I guess is what it would be called. And then, signing duties, if that falls on you.
Mm-hmm. Right, and that's another one of those really important ones. Now, you also want to make sure that when you're talking about, the different duties of officers, which is why we kind of did that overlapping officer session at the beginning of the day today. We don't really want the secretary to also be the treasurer, because the secretary is in charge of writing down the minutes and maybe talking about the vote and what the budget, what was approved and what wasn't. And the treasurer is responsible for the finances. If your secretary and treasurer are the same person, the secretary would then have the opportunity to change the minutes to reflect something that maybe wasn't voted on or wasn't approved. So that's one of those insurance items that they recommend, that we keep that away from being the same person. We also, I don't want to do the minutes as the president, so because I'm conducting the vote, I want that second person to take care of the minutes specifically, and that, in our case, it's Kay's role, and Kay takes care of who said what and who was responsible for what, so that nobody comes back and says, well, Shauna, you took the minutes yourself too, and and it doesn't reflect what actually happened at the meeting. In the case if Kay were gone, we would find another board member to take the minutes, which we've done. Sometimes Liz has taken the minutes. You know, other volunteers in the room have taken the minutes sometimes, so that we had someone separate from the president. I don't want to do that role. I also am not the person who should be writing checks. That's the treasurer's role. So, and Kay, you know, can work with Debbie, so as the treasurer, to do some of those things, but we don't want to overlap each other's roles. We want to be have each other's backs and support each other, but we don't want to do each other's jobs, because it keeps things better for the organization and making sure that we are legally consistent with what we're doing.
I would add to not only that, but keep the jobs separate so that you don't burn yourselves out. PTA should be fun, and when one person is doing all the work, it's not fun. So you'll last longer and you'll enjoy it more, and you'll be a better PTA unit if everyone works together and does their jobs and not everyone else's. This is important because minutes are legal documents. There's lots of rules for us as a 501c3 that we have to follow and things that we have to do. And minutes aren't, here's what I thought, here's how I felt about this. Minutes are just what happened. This is what we accomplished during this meeting. Absolutely brief and to the point. Don't make yourself crazy writing something down. We had to redo our bylaws last spring, and there was a very long discussion about it, and I furiously took notes on everything and then thought, this is so dumb, because I barely understood what was going on and wasn't able to participate in the discussion that I was meant to be a part of. So it doesn't matter what gets said, it matters what gets done in your meeting. Anytime there's a motion, that should be recorded. It doesn't matter who seconded it, just that it was seconded, that a motion was passed, and that's it. You want the exact wording of the motion, but you don't need to get worried about, you know, the rest of the minutia there.
Yeah, that's always nice if you can, other than attendance, not include people's names, you know, within a meeting. So just, you know, maybe somebody who made a motion. So, but it's not important to decide who all was for it and who all was against it. So, because it's not about people, it's about the organization and about our mission.
Yeah, the majority of the meetings that you're going to hold will be regular meetings, but especially, you know, these days, I think we're going to start having a few more special meetings. So make sure that your minutes reflect that. Always, you know, the date, always the time, always where you were meeting. If you're meeting online, that needs to be reflected in your minutes. I always do the time the meeting is called to order. I don't usually put the quorum established on the minutes myself, but I suppose because we've never not had one. So I guess that's.
Well, you do with attendance. So when you note all of those in attendance, so it really is, we just don't put the number.
I do list the names of everyone in attendance. I do list names of any special guest speakers and their titles if we know them. Always approval of previous minutes. Typically that's going to be approved by consensus. You don't have to, you know, hold a vote of yay or nay. Let's see. Report should be. Sorry, I did read these.
No, I think you actually are done. So yeah. The formatting notes, I just have to let you all know. The formatting notes are actually my fault. So in a panic last night, so I was kind of being OCD about what happens if we have technology failure or something. And so I uploaded all of our presentations into Google Docs in case I lost connection, so that somebody else would be able to flip through and run these, and, you know, with the PowerPoints. And the formatting didn't come through on all of them. So my apologies, but we are covering the content.
That's virtual meetings for you. So, you know, we sort of already touched on this. You know, we don't need names of who seconded. You don't need how you feel. Certainly no judgmental phrases. These need to be very generic, as if someone is watching from, you know, above the meeting, what's happening, not involved in it. It doesn't need to be super detailed, certainly not a whole transcript, just very basic. What did you accomplish? What work got done? And that's it.
Right. And some of our prolific writers, sometimes will include flowery, language with, everybody was so very excited and, I mean, or, somebody strenuously disagreed, that really was, that's not necessary, and please don't do that. Just keep them very, very, just like Kay said, very basic, very generic, very black and white. Here's what happened and here's what didn't happen.
Yeah, don't go to a meeting without the agenda. It's so confusing. Make sure you have it with you on paper. Certainly sit as close as you can to your president, to your vice president, whoever's running the meeting, because it's maddening to have to say, I'm sorry, what I didn't get that. What did you just say? So make sure that you're close by, and so that they can, ask if they need clarification on a parliamentary procedure or something that you have, the standing rules for. Make sure that you're close by. I don't know that I've ever had one that was more than a couple of pages, but if you're going to handwrite them, make sure that they're numbered. And it doesn't have to go in order. A lot of times I will go back and fill in if the meeting moves very quickly. And sometimes we don't stick to the agenda in order. Sometimes you have to go out of order because someone has somewhere to be, or time constraints or whatever. It doesn't, you're not locked into a box. Whatever works for your meeting and your unit is okay. The record retention, there are rules for different rules for different forms. So your financial stuff is going to have a different kind of retention period than your minutes, and all of those things should be in your bylaws, or we have that information on the PTA website. So however you decide to keep them, make sure that your entire unit knows how they're being kept, and that's easily accessible by the next unit coming, easily accessible if somebody needs something, and that they're being kept as long as they need to be. Don't throw away your financial documents 5 years after they're done, because you need them longer than that. Right. If the IRS comes back and says, we have a question, and you don't have them, then we have a problem.
Yeah, so and those policies are all set by the IRS. That records retention policy, again, is on the jcpta.org website. Please review it. And before you throw things away, please, please, please review it. It's a big one. This is sort of the parliamentary procedure. So Robert's Rules of Order. And we know when you're, at your school PTA, so things, can get frazzled during a meeting. So, and sometimes it's just a really friendly environment too. But we try to follow, we say Bob's rules on a regular basis. So, but again, goes to, it's the right of the majority. So to rule the nonprofit organization. And it's the right of the minority to always be heard. So if someone doesn't agree with something, they do still have a right to have their voices heard. And that's very important. Sometimes someone could bring something up, like our bylaws discussion this last year during a general meeting, or during a board meeting before we got to the general meeting, and what we were submitting, with someone who brought up, really great, fabulous point. We're very fortunate to have our bylaws chair for Jeffco PTA to be an actual attorney. So, to go through all those things, but, someone brought up a really good point about, how to outline things, or in Jeffco PTA, we have an executive committee, and then we also have the board of directors. So most PTAs just have the board of directors and not an executive committee, but it's really important for everyone who's a member of that to be heard, and they do own the organization as well. They have an ownership. It's the right of the individual. So to equality. So they need to be able to talk about what they want to talk about and how they feel about whatever you're voting on. And it's the right of the absentee to be protected. So maybe I am not able to be present at a meeting. I still am an owner in the organization. So I want to make sure that that legal vote occurs. And maybe somebody who's in the minority brings something up that I agree with. So I'm protected by us following the parliamentary procedures so that everything is heard and majority rules, but every voice is heard within PTA. let's see, anything else? And Michelle, feel free to speak up if you want to say anything. Steps to a motion can get a little confusing here and there. So somebody's going to say, I move that, and I want to give a specific motion. So it's really helpful for the secretary if you have motion forms. Now, this doesn't happen in all the local units. State level PTAs and sometimes council level PTAs, we have forms, where we make a motion. Make sure that it's very clear and concise, and of course it should be in alignment, with your bylaws and the standing rules and those things too. Someone is going to second it, and they're just going to call out. They actually don't, I don't need to chair and say, okay, who's going to second it? I don't need to do that. Somebody makes a motion. We're just going to say it's Natalie in this case because I can see her face, and somebody in the room just calls out that they seconded it. Okay, or maybe 4 people do, because that's usually what happens. After that happens, and we have a first and a second, the motion and the second, then is when the debate discussion takes place, okay? Not before you have a second. Now, we know, of course, we go with Bob's rules, and sometimes things go all over the place, and somebody just kind of jumps in. Really, we want the president to lead that discussion and call on people. So we'd like people to keep their debate to, a minimum, so that we're not going on for 20 minutes with someone giving a lecture to the PTA. So just having that discussion about, should we support this? Should we not support this? And that debate and discussion is a rich part of our PTA meetings because it does give everyone a voice. Now, usually when you're the president, you can kind of feel like, okay, we're nearing the end. Nobody really has any more discussion. Or sometimes we followed Bob's rules and a discussion accidentally occurred before a motion, and we may continue discussion within the formal motion, or it may be done. When you kind of feel like it's at its end and say, okay, so I think we're ready for a vote. Is there, any more discussion? All right, then go ahead and call for your vote. All in favor? All opposed? Is there anyone who's abstaining? That's great. So this is going to get a little harder because we're on Zoom these days. So we have done things like writing our vote in the comments. We have used our little emojis to raise our hand if we agree with something. Now, chairs, you want to make sure that tell everybody and make sure that they all put those emoji hands back down after a vote, so that it's not confusing and somebody voted for 2 things. Make sure that you announce, especially in these days where we sometimes have people at our meetings who are not members, you need to announce that everybody who votes needs to be a member. So you can tell them how to join, and they can actually join before your vote right there at the meeting, especially if you've got the ability online. Or maybe I've just shown up to a PTA meeting and I feel really strongly about something. I can walk my $10 immediately over to the treasurer and pay my dues right there so that I can participate in the vote. That's great. Then, you're pretty much good to go. So most of the time it's not going to be all that difficult or contentious. There have been some questions, about how to do some of these things on Zoom. It's a weird year, or how to do things electronically. Always feel free to reach out to us. Kay, I'll let you go ahead and wrap us up.
Also important to know that if your vote and your discussion sort of devolves into a hot mess and you have to backtrack and start with your rules of order again, it's okay. Like, that happens to every unit. Don't feel like, well, now we have to do the whole thing over again. No, you just back up, start with your rules, and move forward. And it's really a non-issue when it goes crazy like that, because sometimes it will, depending on what you're talking about. Definitely have a copy of Robert's Rules of Order. I don't know that I've ever been to a PTA meeting that book wasn't around somewhere. So I don't look in your closets. You probably have one if you're new to PTA. Any information that you want to know, you can find on our website at jcpta.org. Or the Colorado PTA website, pta.org. We all have the same, forms and help. You can always ask any of your AAVPs. If they don't know the answer right away, they can ask someone who does. So that's their purpose. That's what they're there for. So definitely use them. I can't say enough how important going to our annual conventions is. to meet other people who are involved in PTA, who are doing the same things that you're doing. They're great ways to build community and learn how to do what you're doing. We have all of these e-learning courses on our website, reference guides, all sorts of, hey, this is how you do this during a pandemic. So check our website for, meetings during pandemics. And, we have a whole thing on how to do your financial meetings, during the pandemic. Anything that's happening, we can absolutely help. These meetings are going to be recorded, and your AAVPs will have a link for you to watch them. So you can always refer back, and we're happy to answer any questions that you ever have.
And Angela asked if she was required to record the Zoom meetings. No, you're not required to do that. So Jeffco PTA, we've offered it kind of as a service. We've been doing our meetings. We moved our Jeffco PTA general meeting, which are all open to attending those general meetings, but we've actually opened all of our monthly meetings so you can come. We've recorded them just to give everyone sort of a gift of access. And I think that's really important because we're in this kind of strange place. I need to make sure that chairs know too, when you're taking care of this, it can be really helpful if you ask somebody to be the monitor of the chat, because that gets really, really difficult. So I've asked both Kay and Jen from time to time to monitor the chat or monitor who else is trying to get into the room when we're doing these meetings. We've recorded them as a service. We also have some of our meetings that are past still up on our website under events for you, so that you can refer back to see how we conducted our electronic vote. So, and you can see our form that was for bylaws. So how we conducted various business, put our agenda up there, on the meetings. It's on the website, just kind of made things a little easier. Now, when you're chairing and you're on Zoom too, the other thing, if things get to what Kay calls the hot mess, you also need to know if people are arguing with each other or things get nasty, you have the power as the chair on a regular basis, always, so to adjourn the meeting. If it's out of control, you can adjourn the meeting. So what's appropriate and what's not appropriate for debate, if you can't get someone to stop arguing, stop yelling, or any of those kind of things, perhaps you have a Zoom bomber. So please don't put your Zoom links. This is why you all registered for this. Don't put them on your website. Don't put them on social media. Please have people, if you can do that registration, or just email out the link just to your members. For our high school, we just did this with our PTSA for a meeting Monday night. We have a registration so that we don't have the Zoom bombers. Some of our schools, not just PTAs, have actually had this happen. We need to be very careful about, how you advertise that link, and it's better if you know. And you also need to maybe make someone a co-host of the meeting. So if someone is maybe putting things that are nasty in the chat, you need to boot that person from the meeting. That's not okay. Anything that's inappropriate. Chair, you need to ask that it stop. If your president doesn't know that it's happening, I need to rely on Kay, Jen, any of my board members to speak up and say, here's what's going on, and it needs to stop. That's important. Excuse me. I've been talking way too much today. Co-host, thank you, Jen. Co-host for technical difficulties. Actually, Jen, can you unmute yourself for a minute and say this? I'm going to take a drink of water.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we learned in the virtual conferences is one of an important thing to do is to have a co-host set up. So you have two people running the meeting, because inevitably, if you only have one person, it's going to be the president and it's going to be their internet that goes out. So if you have two co-hosts, then you can run it from different sides. And in one meeting, we actually had three co-hosts because we were pretty sure that Shauna and I were going to get kicked out at some point in the meeting. So we had John McDonald as his own co-host. But then you can also watch the group chat. You can watch the meeting room and let people in while somebody else is presenting, and you can pass it off pretty seamlessly throughout the meeting. And it's just another form of backup for other people.
Yep. And, you're in a pandemic space. So if you need to purchase a Zoom membership, or something else, there are some resources that are free. Freeconferencecall.com actually offers online meetings. There are some limitations. Zoom has some free resources as well. And you can use all of those. So you can also partner with your principal who has a Zoom account already through the district and use that. It would be nice if, you know, those of you in the PTA are also co-hosts of that so that you are running your own meeting at the same way. And if someone is inappropriate, you do need to go ahead and address that. So if you need to adjourn a meeting because there was something inappropriate happening, Zoom bomber or whatnot, go ahead and adjourn that meeting. You can always schedule a special meeting, and those are in your bylaws. You need to see how many days notice that you have, and go back through and, you know, maybe this time don't share that information on your website or on your Facebook page or on your Twitter account. It's just it's a weird space that we're in, but this actually provides us a lot of flexibility to meet our fellow parents who we want to be members, who we want to recruit for future leadership. Because, and I'm just going to be honest here, so I happen to be wearing yoga pants. So, you know, these are PTA meetings that you can attend in your pajamas, yoga pants, you know, whatever it is. Be comfortable, and, you know, you can do business on top and, you know, comfortable on the bottom or comfortable all over. It's really up to you, but it can make PTA more accessible to absolutely everyone. You can update or upload Zoom onto your phone on the app and attend things from your phone as well. So think about access and how you're making your PTA more accessible during this really strange time. And a huge, huge thank you to everyone for stepping up to be in these leadership roles. We know that it's work, so we are volunteers. Everyone in PTA is a volunteer, on up to the national PTA president. We don't get paid for this, so we're just passionate about the mission, passionate about helping our children, and we appreciate your partnership and want you to know that we are always, always here for you.
I'd like to add something as well. Just remember that this isn't, none of us saw this coming. So I know that there are probably plenty of you who thought you were gonna have someone from a previous board to walk you through, and suddenly we're not able to hold hands and answer questions. Give yourselves a little grace. None of us have done this before, and it's weird and it's uncomfortable, and we'll get there. But no question is a stupid question. So if you have a question, let us know, and we'd love to help you and make this easier for you. Because we know it's difficult.